When Zoe was born, the first thing Phil said was, "Oh, too bad, she looks like Wendy." Poor kid. It's unimaginable for someone to say such words about their newborn child. Phil's true intention from the beginning must have been just the money. He observed my struggles with childcare from a distance, merely commenting, "Babies sure are tough, huh," while sipping his drink. Since then, Phil has shown absolutely no interest in childcare. A useless wife who doesn't help with childcare deserves a divorce. And pay me $50,000 in compensation. Phil was laughing loudly with Erica. I was shaking with an anger I had never felt before. What does he think a child is? I will never hand Zoe over to such a man. Let him keep running from reality, living the easy life. The world won't go as he pleases. Sorry to burst his bubble, but he's going to hell, not heaven. My name is Wendy Morgan, a 43-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Phil, and our daughter, Zoe, who was born 2 years ago. We met at a friend's wedding after party 3 years ago. I work as a novelist, which means I lead a somewhat secluded life. Because of this, I'm quite shy, especially in the more relaxed atmosphere of the after party, which was quite different from the formal wedding reception. When I was about to leave the party quietly, Phil, who would later become my husband, approached me and asked, "Hey, are you leaving already?" My first impression of him was that he seemed like a sincere person. It turned out that Phil also wasn't comfortable with the party's atmosphere and was feeling bored. This encounter led us to start communicating, and eventually, we began dating. I noticed that Phil was a bit naive and out of touch with the world. One day, he said, "My parents are telling me it's time to become independent. I guess it's understandable since I've been living abroad, right? I'm still not used to life here, it's kind of scary." Phil was younger than me, already 35 at the time, and certainly an adult. Despite his international experience, he seemed a bit sheltered. However, his innocence and naivety stirred my maternal instincts. Before I knew it, I had invited Phil to live with me, and we started a cohabiting life. My house is a 2-family home, with the first floor as my workspace and the second as our living space. It was around the time Phil had comfortably settled into my house. You know, my dad said he'd give us $5,000 if we had a child. "So, Wendy, let's get married." His proposal felt as casual as suggesting a trip. Having almost no experience in romance, I accepted his proposal. Eventually, I became pregnant. Being 40 years old, there were many things I had to be careful about. It coincided with the final episode of a long-running series I was writing. So, for the sake of Phil and our child, I decided to take a break from work. 2 years have passed since Zoe was born. Zoe has entered the terrible twos, often crying and resisting everything. I try my best to satisfy her needs, seeing it as a part of her growth. Wendy. Zoe is so loud I can't sleep. Can you make her quiet? One evening, Phil appeared in the living room and said so. It was just past 8 p.m. Phil had been out drinking at a company party the night before, and had gone straight to work from there. He was understandably exhausted. "I'm sorry. I think she'll settle down soon." I wanted to blame Phil for not coming home and instead going out to drink. But calming Zoe was my priority. If Zoe calmed down, Phil would be satisfied too. "You've got it easy, Wendy. You don't work and just stay at home. You only have to do household chores and take care of the child. I have to work every day." After saying that, Phil returned to the bedroom. I don't know where he picked up that phrase, but it has become his standard line lately. As a father who doesn't participate in childcare, Phil's words feel like a cliché to me, and I'm weary of them. When he learned I was pregnant, Phil was overjoyed. "Yes. Wendy, we did it. This means we get $5,000. although I didn't want to hear such words. Phil quickly reported the pregnancy to his parents and seemed to have received the $5,000. He was as happy as if he had received a bonus. Common sense would suggest that this money from his parents was meant as a celebration gift. Typically, such money would be spent on things like baby clothes or milk. But Phil unhesitatingly pocketed it for himself. Despite this, I made sure to prepare a return gift for my in-laws using my own money. Phil is, for better or worse, naive and lacks common sense. Additionally, he seems to lack the skill to consider other people's feelings. The first words he said when Zoe was born were, "Oh, too bad, she looks like Wendy. Poor kid." It's hard to believe these were words for his newborn daughter. Phil was truly focused on the immediate $5,000 from the start. He just watched me struggle with childcare, saying, "Babies are tough, huh," while drinking alcohol. To this day, Phil has shown no interest in childcare. One day, I had to meet someone for work. Although I was on break, I wanted to prepare for my return by discussing a new project with my publisher. I called my parents to ask if they could take care of Zoe. Hearing this, Phil said, "Huh? Who does unemployed like you need to meet? Don't you think it's pitiful to leave your child and go somewhere? Terrible mother, the worst. This is what they call unfit to be a mother." His words were harsh. Even I couldn't help but retort, "Then why don't you look after Zoe? I'm sure she'd rather stay with her dad than go to her grandparents." Phil visibly distorted his face in response. "Don't be ridiculous. Why should I have to spend time with the kid? I'm busy, I don't have time to look after a child." "Busy," he says, "but he's probably just going to the casino." Disgusted with Phil's words, I decided to stick to my original plan and leave Zoe with my parents. My father would come to pick her up in his car, as their house was a bit far away. However, since my father always drinks in the afternoon, I usually have to go pick her up myself. After finishing the meeting in the evening, I was preparing to go get Zoe when Phil unexpectedly appeared in the living room. He probably lost at casino and ran out of money early. I said, "Good timing, I'm about to go pick up Zoe. Can you drive me there?" I thought that as her father, he should at least do that much. But as expected, Phil's response was, "No, it's too bothersome." I wasn't disappointed, as I was ready to leave the house anyway. Then, surprisingly, Phil said something unexpected. "Fine, I'll drive." I doubted my ears for a moment, but seeing Phil with the car keys heading to the parking lot, I felt for the first time that maybe he had some awareness of being a father. I was filled with a small joy, which was shattered as soon as I got into the car and closed the door. "Since I'm driving, give me $300. He said this, extending his hand. So, this was his intention. My heart sank. I couldn't refuse now that I was already in the car. Zoe was waiting at my parents' house. With no other choice, I handed over the $300. "Thanks. Just a little more and I would have won. Trust me, I'll win." He started the car, humming as if about to break into song. In hindsight, maybe it was a mistake to ask Phil to drive. We spent the drive in silence. As we were just a few kilometers from my parents' house, Phil's phone rang. He picked it up and started checking the messages. "Phil, be careful. It's dangerous. You should park the car before checking your phone." As I warned him, Phil continued to look at his smartphone screen while driving. It's usual for me, I'm used to it." "It's fine." He said this and even seemed to be replying to a message. Then, I felt the car subtly veer to the right. "Watch out," I thought. Just as I saw the concrete barrier of the central reservation looming in front of us, Phil hastily turned the steering wheel. With a loud crash, the car came to a halt. I remember the airbags deploying and feeling a sense of pressure. As I heard distant sirens, I lost consciousness. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital bed. I tried to move a little. Ouch. A pain like numbness spread throughout my body. Honestly, when we hit the barrier, I thought it was the end. As we crashed, the first thing that flashed through my mind was Zoe. I wondered how Zoe was doing. Was she safely at my parents' house? I hoped Phil hadn't done anything strange. Right, what about Phil? As I looked around with just my eyes, a woman asked me, "Are you looking for your husband?" When I moved my gaze towards the voice, I saw a woman in the hospital room. "You are from today's meeting." Yes, she was the new representative from the publishing house I had a meeting with today. Her name was Janet Bradley, if I remember correctly. "Mrs. Morgan, your husband had minor injuries. So after treatment and examination, he went home. It's terrible, isn't it? Leaving without even visiting your room while you're in this condition." Janet seemed more upset than me. Apparently, she had called to thank me for the meeting today. But since the call came after the accident, someone at the hospital had taken the call and explained the situation to her. The hospital staff asked if it was okay to explain the situation to me. "Mrs. Morgan, you nodded strongly even though you were almost unconscious. You're too devoted to your work." Janet said this with a smile. "Your daughter is safe at your parents' house, so please don't worry. Also, if you don't mind, may I help you while you're in the hospital?" Knowing Phil was unreliable, I was grateful for Janet's offer. But I also felt conflicted about being a burden to her. "Please let me help. I am your representative, after all." Encouraged by Janet's strong words, I decided to accept her help. Thanks to her devoted assistance, I was able to leave the hospital. However, since I had severely injured my back, I couldn't walk due to the pain and had to use a wheelchair for some time. Throughout my hospital stay, Phil never visited. He only occasionally sent emails asking for money, like transfer $300. It was my father who drove me from the hospital to my home. I was able to take Zoe home with me then. My parents, understanding the situation, offered to keep Zoe for a while longer. But I couldn't let that happen. I wanted to spend time with Zoe. Even when I said, "It's fine, Phil is there too," my father seemed uneasy, as if sensing something was wrong. However, he didn't pry further and just said, "Call me anytime if you need anything," before leaving. Fortunately, my house was built with the future in mind for living with my parents. So the first floor was barrier-free. I used to work there but spent most of my time on the second floor after getting married and taking a break. I had often stayed overnight on the first floor for work, so bedding was always available. The rooms on the first floor, less cluttered than those on the second, were spacious and safe for Zoe to play in due to the barrier-free design. I shifted from my wheelchair and managed to sit on the sofa. This was something I could do thanks to Janet's active involvement in my rehabilitation. Zoe noticed me sitting on the sofa and came running up to me. "Mommy, does your leg hurt? I will rub it to make it better." As she said that, Zoe gently stroked my leg. I couldn't help but hug her, overwhelmed with love for my gentle and precious child. How can Phil not see how precious she is? I am deeply grateful that Zoe wasn't in the car with Phil during the accident. I'm relieved that I was the only one who got seriously injured. I could feel a dark emotion towards Phil rising within me. For my sake, and more importantly, for Zoe's sake, I started to think about our future life with Phil. The day after I was discharged, Phil came to the room on the first floor. He had a bandage on his forehead, probably from an injury he sustained during the accident. "Huh, this part is also my house?" I thought it was just a 2-story apartment. It's not surprising he thought that since the house has separate entrances for the first and second floors. I had emailed him about my discharge the day before. But was he really not curious why I didn't return to the second floor? Probably not. He's a man who never cares about anything around him. A bit stunned, I looked at Phil, noticing an unfamiliar young woman behind him. She looked quite young, probably in her early 20s. This is Erica. She's young and cute, right? Totally different from Wendy. Sorry to spring this on you suddenly, Wendy, but I want you to leave this house. I'm going to marry Erica. His abrupt demand left me dumbfounded. However, the moment I saw the young woman, I had imagined this possibility. Then Phil began to talk about something even more outrageous. You know, I've been thinking. That day, I drove because of your errand. And we had an accident, right? So, I'm the victim who got dragged into this. You're the perpetrator. Your injury might be self-inflicted. But mine is completely collateral, right? So, I'm going to claim compensation from you. I was speechless. How could he even think like that? I wanted to see inside Phil's head. Plus, Erica is a nurse. She's nothing like the unemployed Wendy. She works and doesn't hesitate to spend money. She's the best woman, Phil said, hugging Erica. Seeing them, I felt no jealousy, only revulsion. Then Phil said something utterly ridiculous. Also, I'll take Zoe. There's some kind of allowance for having a child, right? Wendy, you're cunning, keeping such a good deal to yourself. Children are surprisingly useful. You always left Zoe at your parents', right? Such a terrible mother. I'll definitely get custody since you're in a wheelchair now. If I weren't in a wheelchair, I might have lashed out at Phil for saying such absurd things. My fists clenched on my lap, trembling. Zoe, sensing something, clung tightly to me. A useless wife who doesn't do childcare deserves a divorce. And pay me $50,000 in compensation. Phil and Erica laughed together. I trembled with a rage I had never felt before. What does he think children are? I would never hand Zoe over to such a man. Let him keep running from reality, living the easy life. The world won't bend to his will. I'm sorry to burst his bubble, but he's going to hell, not heaven. I will never forgive him. Ignoring the foolish couple laughing loudly, I took a piece of paper from the chest on my work desk and handed it to Phil. Fine. Here, a divorce form. Phil looked confused for a moment but then laughed again. You're quick, Wendy. Don't forget about the $50,000. All he ever talks about is money. I sighed the deepest sigh of my life internally. All right, $50,000. Just to be clear. This is for the accident that was my fault, and it's compensation for that, right? Phil, pleased at the prospect of getting money, nodded vigorously. Exactly. It's your fault I was in an accident. Despite my astonishment, I kept the conversation calm. Then, I'll send the official documents later. Make sure to sign them along with the divorce papers. And I'll be taking care of Zoe. I won't hand over her custody to you. That's non-negotiable. I said this, looking earnestly into Phil's eyes. Overwhelmed by my firmness, Phil replied, okay, I give up on Zoe. When I think about it, she doesn't really like me and isn't cute. I didn't tell you, but Erica is pregnant. So, we don't need Zoe. I'll get another $5,000 from my dad. I wondered if he ever considered how Zoe felt, being called not cute by her father. I didn't want Zoe to hear any more of Phil's hurtful words, so I urged her to go to the back room. Phil, are you really okay with this? I asked Phil for final confirmation. Huh? Of course, I am. Wendy, you should leave this house as soon as possible. And don't forget to transfer the $50,000 soon. Phil and Erica said this and went back to their room upstairs. I called for Zoe. She came running to me and hugged me tightly. Mommy, will Zoe and Mommy always be together? Zoe looked worried. I hugged her tightly to reassure her. It's okay, we'll always be together. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. I moved my work desk and all other furniture from the first floor to another place. Soon after, I received the signed agreement for the compensation and the divorce papers from Phil at my parents' house. He really is a naive man. His straightforwardness was what attracted me to him initially. But now there's no love left in my heart for him. I can ruthlessly let him fall into hell. It was about a month after I left the house. I noticed the vibration of my smartphone while taking a break from my new manuscript. I had been so absorbed in my writing that I hadn't noticed. But there were dozens of missed calls from Phil on my phone. I was expecting him to contact me soon. I didn't want to talk to Phil, but I had no choice but to answer. Yes? What's up? I could hear Phil's unusually panicked voice on the other end. Hey, Wendy. What the hell is going on? Some guys are here trying to take all the furniture and saying they're going to demolish the house. I couldn't help but burst into laughter, finding Phil's frantic voice amusing. Hey. Wendy, don't laugh. Get over here right now. This isn't going to end well for you. Phil hung up the phone abruptly. He cut off the call himself. Even though there was no guarantee I would answer again or agree to go there. He's such a foolish man, not thinking ahead. However, I needed to show him hell, so I decided to go to Phil. Zoe is currently attending nursery school. While I was considering how to get there, the intercom at the entrance rang. It was Janet Bradley. Ms. Morgan, are you going somewhere? I explained the situation and that I was going to see Phil. Then Janet said, in that case, Ms. Morgan, let me accompany you. I'm sure I can be of help. She helped me into the car and drove me to Phil's place. During the drive, Janet revealed a shocking truth to me. I was convinced of many things and, in a way, eager to see Phil. When we arrived at the house, movers were busy taking out the furniture. As soon as Phil saw me, he rushed over. Hey. What's happening? Is this your doing? Do something about this. Phil was full of bluster until he saw Janet getting out of the car, then his face went pale. Long time no see, Phil. Janet revealed that she was Phil's real sister. I was surprised when I heard this in the car. They were almost estranged, she said. We shouldn't talk standing outside. Let's go inside. After saying this, we moved to the room on the first floor. Phil was speechless and pale. The woman with him, Erica, looked puzzled too. In the empty room, I knew we had to talk, so I started the conversation. This house is going to be demolished. I don't need it anymore. All the stuff is being moved to my new house. I'm going to live there with Zoe and my parents. As I said this, Phil suddenly got angry and started talking. Why would you do that? Erica and I are living here now. You can't just demolish it. Erica was nodding in agreement. This is my house. I built it with my own money. Phil seemed unable to accept my words. How can a perpetual unemployed like you afford a house? Stop lying. It was Janet who countered Phil's words. Phil, you really don't know anything. Wendy has been modest, but she's a successful author. She has written many books, some of which have been adapted into dramas and movies. Someone like you really isn't worthy of her. Though as successful might be an exaggeration, it's true that several of my works have been adapted. But you didn't write anything while we were married, right? So you're still unemployed. Phil's point was, as usual, off the mark. Janet continued, her voice tinged with exasperation. Did you even listen? Wendy has written several works in the past. The more they sell, the more money she makes. That's royalties. Phil seemed not to understand. Phil, income isn't just about salary. I may not have a salary, but I earn about $300,000 a year in royalties. Phil's eyes widened. Even after finding a younger, cuter nurse like Erica and deciding I was no longer needed. The sound of a $300,000 annual income caught his attention. Then, that means I can get half of that in the divorce settlement, right? Yes. That's $150,000 a year. I was speechless at his simplicity. Phil. Wendy's royalties are from works published before she met you. So you won't get a penny from that. Phil froze with a baffled look. I wish he could cherish the brief moment he fantasized about having $150,000. I delivered the final blow. And this house is the same. I built it before I got married. So it's not part of any settlement. The same goes for the furniture. You just moved into my house. Since we're divorced and you're a stranger now, please leave soon. You can only take what you bought yourself. Phil still looked unsatisfied. He came at me with a fierce expression, demanding, then where are we supposed to live? I don't know. You have $50,000, so you should find a place easily, right? Phil's expression darkened. The $50,000 is gone. I went on an overseas trip right away, lost it all gambling. Typical Phil, squandering a fortune on gambling. But I felt not an ounce of sympathy. But your new wife is a nurse, right? Good for you, having a wife with a steady income. I smiled sweetly. Phil also managed a smile. Yeah, Erica being a nurse has really helped. I quit my job, and Erica has taken a month's leave, right? Erica's face fell at his words. That girl isn't a nurse or anything. Janet said this. When I heard Phil got married again. Dad asked me to look into Erica's background. Erica, you really are something, aren't you? Does Phil know everything? Erica shook her head slightly. Erica. You're a nurse, right? You said you earn $4,000 a month, didn't you? Wait, is that not true? Phil, naive and ignorant, had been deceived by Erica. It's a bit pitiful, but this is what he brought upon himself. It's true that she was aiming to be a nurse. But didn't you injure a patient by losing your temper during your training? The family didn't press charges out of kindness. But you ran away without paying any settlement, right? That's the lowest. Erica glared at Janet fiercely. And recently, you've been frequenting a nightclub? I heard that your outstanding debts exceed several $10,000. You're running away from that too. Phil went pale hearing this. What, nightclub? Debt. Erica, you don't have money? Didn't you borrow money from a loan shark recently? You said it was just because you were short on cash. I became your guarantor thinking you were a nurse. Erica, defiantly, said, what about it? Phil, you acted like you had money. If I knew you didn't have any, I wouldn't have married you. Both were equally to blame in this mess, bickering back and forth. Excuse me for interrupting your argument. I cut in between the quarreling couple. Since there was infidelity during the marriage, I'll be claiming compensation from both of you, thank you. My words brought their argument to an abrupt halt. And, please return the $50,000 I paid. The police reviewed the dashcam footage and confirmed that the accident was due to Phil's negligence. I paid because you said it was my fault, but since it wasn't, please return it. Phil's face twisted more and more. He looked like he was about to cry, despite being a grown man. And don't even think about running away. I'll relentlessly pursue you, but besides that, Janet has already informed the patient's family, the nightclub, and the loan sharks about your whereabouts. They were all relieved to hear you've been found. Lucky for you." Phil looked anything but lucky, and Erica finally broke down crying. The only sound in the now empty house was Erica's wailing. "You know, Phil, Erica is your 7th wife." I almost dropped my teacup when Janet casually mentioned this while reviewing a manuscript. The $5,000 dad gave each time Phil got someone pregnant was meant as an apology to the women. Phil misunderstood it as a reward for having kids. I couldn't believe how someone could misunderstand something so gravely. Janet had cut ties with Phil because of his irresponsibility. Sending Phil abroad was Dad's idea. He didn't make any trouble under surveillance there. It's surprising that he met you, Ms. Morgan, upon returning to the US. Apparently, Phil has 6 kids, including Zoe. After each divorce, his family had to clean up his mess. But they were fed up after the Erica situation. And Erica wasn't even pregnant. It was a lie for the $5,000. Her SNS posts showed her drinking, smoking, and even bungee jumping overseas. "Actually, my dad, my husband, and I are big fans of yours, Ms. Morgan. We were so happy to hear Phil married you, but also very worried when we heard you had an accident because of Phil. I regret not introducing myself as his sister right away. I didn't want you to dislike me. I wanted to make up for Phil's actions and hoped being with you would change him. But in the end, I only caused you trouble. I'm so sorry." I hugged Janet tightly. Phil had such a wonderful family, yet he failed to appreciate it. "Mommy, your walking is good." After a long rehabilitation period, I was able to walk slowly on my own. Janet still helps me with my writing and daily life. Phil is now working hard to pay off his debts, living under his father's supervision with Erica. I'm living in a new 2-family house, writing novels, and spending time with Zoe and my parents. "Mommy, you're great, I love you." Zoe kissed my cheek, and I hugged her tightly. I have my beloved work and my dear Zoe. This is my heaven. I couldn't wish for more happiness than I have now.